0930 in Tavares, Florida, on the Florida Central Railroad's Sorrento branch. We find Orlando Northwestern Train 100 sitting while having some final checks done before starting Train 100, the Orlando Northwestern's Golden Triangle train. The Sorrento branch is part of the Atlantic Coastline Railroad from Sanford to Tavares. Built in 1885 by the Sanford and Lake Eustis Railroad, this line eventually became part of the Atlantic Coastline, the Seaboard Coastline, Seaboard System, CSX, and ultimately now under ownership of the Florida Central Railroad. In the ACL days, the line saw up to 4 different trains a day. Now, with the line ending in Sorrento, the Florida Central only uses this portion past Mount Dora for staging and storage trains. Facing eastward on today's train is Clinchfield F7 number 800, which many rail fans will remember from the 2017 annual CSX Santa train. Facing west is Seaboard Airline GP9 number 1912, painted in the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum livery. The 800, which is on lease to the ONW, has been a fan favorite for many. The GP9 was received in a trade for the Jackson Square Dome car, which you'll see later on in this video, as I've used some old footage as well as footage shot from today's run. Tavares is a small community in Lake County known as Florida's Seaplane City. Back then, the Seaboard Airline and the Atlantic Coastline both served and came through Tavares. The line continues south out of Tavares toward Apopka and Orlando, with the Seaboard Airline having trackage rides over the ACL rails that the ACL used to get to Lake Harris. This portion of the track would be the start of the Seaboard's way into Orlando via Wildwood and Leesburg off of the CSX main line that we know today as the S line, and the ACL coming from Sanford via the A line at Sorrento, and from Ocala via Leesburg and the ACL High Springs route. The line to Eustis was also Atlantic Coastline and is also how the coastline got to Leesburg, whereas the Seaboard went straight from another Y that was just south of the station. The line to Eustis also went toward Astor, with the split just being north of Eustis at the Fort Mason Y. As passengers are on board now, we watch ONW Train 100 begin its day, with starting off with a trip toward Mount Dora down the Atlantic Coastline rails.
Hey, we're going to stop by the plaza. Usually we don't stop there. We just do like a flag stop if somebody's there. We just keep rolling. But we got to drop off there this morning, so we'll have to make a stop when we get there.
The trip to Mount Dora is over the original 1923 dated 85-pound Atlantic Coastline rails. This line only seeing the occasional storage train nowadays in the Orlando Northwestern trains. There's no real need to spend money to upkeep it to certain class standards as if it was still a revenue-generating line for the Florida Central or a high-speed line for an Amtrak train. At 12 miles an hour, the 5-mile journey down to Mount Dora takes 30 minutes down the old jointed rail. halfway between Tavares and Mount Dora is the Mount Dora Plaza, which is where the Orlando Northwestern uses as a station stop, loads food for its various trains like the dinner train, pizza train, and its barbecue train. It's also where people can park and ride a shuttle train when it runs for special events like the Mount Dora Arts Festival. Northward on the main line a little more toward Mount Dora is an old Atlantic coastline trestle, still showing the painted-on date, and if you look closely, the Atlantic Coastline Railroad name can still be seen on the steel. And now we see train 100 pulling into its station stop in Mount Dora, where they'll unload passengers, load on new ones. The crew will swap ends, with 1912 being the new leader. Then they'll make their trip back to Tavares and then toward Eustis. The train depot in Mount Dora was completed in 1915 by the Atlantic Coastline at a cost of $8,223. At that time, the ACL operated 2 passenger trains daily in each direction. By 1922, the schedule increased to 4 mixed trains, mail, freight, and passenger, daily. The ACL discontinued service to Mount Dora in 1950, and today the depot serves as the city's Chamber of Commerce. On March 5, 1992, the station was added to the U.S. National Register of Historic Places. Here in Tavares at the milepost ST-783.0 on the Florida Central Railroad, and showing 20 route miles out of Leesburg, is the Tavares Union Station, located just next to Wooten Park in downtown Tavares. The Jacksonville, Tampa, and Key West Railway constructed the original station in 1886, and at one time it was the Union Station with the St. John's and Lake Eustis Railway, and the Sanford and Lake Eustis using the station. After the railroads left the station, it was used as the meeting hall for the American Legion Post number 76. Later, it became a pottery shop, and finally in 1988 it had burned down. The present station you see here now was constructed in 2013. After the train pulls into the station, they pull past the switch, conductors get out and line the switch off the Sorrento branch toward the Umatilla branch. Then they spot the train backwards so they can unload and load passengers. Here on a different day, we see Orlando Northwestern locomotive number 1510 pulling its train off the Sorrento branch from Mount Dora into Tavares to make its station stop. The train will unload its passengers, load its new ones, and make its next run. As the train sits in the station at Tavares, which is also the Chamber of Commerce, we watch the conductor help guests on and off the train, careful to get them on and off safely. While this is happening, the engineer is walking from one end of the train to the other end to be prepared once the station stop is complete to roll on to the next place. If you walk inside the station, there's a gift shop as well as a board with each train arrival time. The riders can purchase their tickets inside the station here as well. Now with all passengers and crew on board, it's time to depart Tavares northbound toward Eustis. The line up to Eustis is a 4.5, maybe 5-mile trip up the Atlantic coastline route to Leesburg. Built by the St. John's and Lake Eustis Railway in 1882, this line wasn't a standard gauge railroad. It was later on converted to standard gauge and became part of the Atlantic Coastline Railroad in 1902. Now on board the train, this is also a different day. We ride the O&W's pizza train northward toward Eustis, with some of the O&W staff giving us a little history lesson on the line. Staff on the train are very nice and friendly, and they did a fantastic job putting on a show for us with an event organized on this day by Shannon Sikora.
They pick up good speed through that. Travis and I were shooting in Ocala one day. Joe Cool was in stage.
I didn't want to see how it goes and all that. Eventually, we got down to just 2 railroads up here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Tavares and Gulf Railroad. They were neat. Obviously, they wanted to go to the Gulf of Mexico. Well, they made it as far as Groveland, Florida, which is not anywhere near the Gulf, but they did make it that far. And it was called the TNG, the Tug and Grunt, I've heard it as. But there was one other that right with TNG. I think I can think of it this morning. I could. All these little names. We all think of all these trees, but there wasn't any trees. There were
The Atlantic Coastline did have a depot here in Eustis, which we're seeing right now, as train 100 rolls past northbound toward Eustis. This depot is not used anymore by the railroad. It is owned by a local. The train order
Yeah, well, it took about 5 hours to urban renewal the old station here, and they cut it down to nothing.
Now arriving in Eustis, before we make our return trip to Tavares, we're going to go a little deeper into the good relationship between the Florida Central and the Orlando Northwestern, and a few things that come about as a result of that. Back in September 2018, local railfan Shannon Sikora, working with the Orlando Northwestern, Florida Central Railroad, and the city of Winter Garden, organized an effort to bring the train to the Central Florida Railroad Museum to join in with a vintage car show that was taking place. 2 locomotives from the ONW, being the GP30 and the F unit, were the 2 chosen to take the trip down. With the ONW providing power and the Florida Central providing a crew, they got the 2 engines down to Winter Garden for a nighttime photo shoot and a photography class. The train itself also brought a lot of attention, as there hasn't been a train on these tracks in Winter Garden for about 4 years, and a lot of people came over to see the 2 General Motors products. Now in Winter Garden, the power set slowly rolls over the practically abandoned tracks toward the depot. As Pinsley managers look on to help make sure the move is as safe as possible, many people stop and watch as the 2 vintage machines roll into the depot for the event the next day. After the show is over, the power has to make its return to Tavares and Eustis. The Florida Central has a train of 25 steel-loaded cars that need to be taken to Eustis, and since there's an FCEN crew involved in getting the power back to Eustis with the ONW crew, the 2 partner up in a win-win situation to get the train of 25 cars up to Eustis. The Florida Central Railroad is a big presence in the Orlando area, serving Orange and Lake counties. They service industries in Orlando, Zellwood, Eustis, and Apopka, with them getting their traffic from the CSX at the interchange point in Taft. The line from Tavares to Orlando was chartered as the Tavares, Orlando, and Atlantic Railroad in 1881. Construction began in Tavares in 1882, and the 5-0 gauge line reached Orlando, 32 miles, via Lake Gem, Zellwood, Plymouth, and Apopka in 1884. The TONA negotiated an agreement with the St. Johns and Lake Eustis Railway to share the right-of-way around the west side of Lake Dora for a distance of about 1 mile. This saved building another trestle and bridge over the Dora Canal. It also created an unusual 4-rail dual-gauge arrangement with the TONA 5-0 gauge rails on the outside and the St. Johns and Lake Eustis 3-0 gauge rail in between, also referred to as Gauntlet Rail. The TONA also had financial difficulties after failing to pay interest on bonds and was sold at a public auction to the Florida Central and Peninsula Railroad in 1891. The TFC&P was a fairly large system reaching from Fernandina Beach to Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Ocala, Wildwood, Leesburg, and Tavares. The TFC&P had financial difficulties as well and reorganized as the Florida Central and Peninsular Company, FCEN, the omitted from the name, in 1893. The Seaboard Airline Railway bought controlling interest in the FCEN in 1900 and fully merged it into their system in 1903. The SAL had financial difficulties and was reorganized as the Seaboard Airline Railway Company in 1915, company added to the name. The SAL again reorganized as the Seaboard Airline Railroad Company, SAL, in 1945. In 1967, the SAL merged with the Atlantic Coastline to form the Seaboard Coastline Railroad. With the exception of a few farm spurs, no abandonments have occurred on the original TONA line, and the entire original 32 miles are intact and fully operational today as the Florida Central Railroad. Now, let's go back to Eustis and get back to the Orlando Northwestern and watch them run southbound from Eustis to Tavares. Now having arrived back in Tavares and performed its station stop, we see train 100 heading back toward Mount Dora. We'll follow this train to Mount Dora one last time and follow it part of the way back toward Tavares. Please enjoy the next couple scenes as they head down this old historic Atlantic coastline track. I hope you enjoyed this presentation of the Orlando Northwestern Railway. For more information on the ONW's different trains, schedule, and special events, please visit thefloridatrain.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you out on the rails next time.